So what we're going to be working with, again, we're going to work with the DSS V7. I am working with the latest version, by the way. It's 6491 on the DSS V7. So one of the first things we're going to do is we're going to use what's called the file commander. Now, to use the file commander, we highly recommend that you test this. It's not in our official releases. It's being given out to those who really need it, but we recommend that you test it and always back up your data. And try not to do this before you do it in production. If you want this small update, which I'll present, which we're looking at right here, it's the U070011 small update, which is also located in our maintenance software update that we're going to show you. So in maintenance software update, one of the first things you want to do is you want to add this small update called File Commander version 0.1. I'm going to ask the engineers to send a ticket, or support ticket or pre-sales, and we'll provide it to you. And again, don't use it in the beginning with production. Make sure your data is backed up. We always recommend that in the event something might happen. And also, please test this. So we really want to push that as well, that it's going to be somewhere in the future into our future releases. But right now, because there are some demand for it, we thought we'd probably provide this. Now, the data replication is already in the DSS V7 and V6. By the way, the file commander does work with V6 as well. So once you receive the small update from the engineers, you're going to enter it and upload it. Once you have the file, place it in here, and then upload and reboot the system. I'm going to make sure that it does state at the bottom here of the details of this release version that it does show the file commander version 0.1. And again, if you don't know, if you just click here, you'll see the build version, and that it is the default version with a check mark. And if you click here, it says details, and you can verify it from there. Okay, once I've set this up, and now that I've already completed, let's say, for example, you have an existing volume group, and let's say we had VG00 that you see up here on the left under the volume groups. And let's say your capacity is run out. You're out of space. What do? So what's unique, and we're seeing this because capacity is always growing, as we know, depending upon your environment. And so let's say you decide to add a larger RAID array or another RAID controller, such as I have here. So you can imagine this would be much larger, maybe 10 or 12 terabyte, and your existing years ago, you were 3.7 terabytes. Well, you can do this and transfer the data internally into the DSS without hitting your network, which is very important because of congestion and time. So if you can think about it, if you keep everything inside DSS and allows you to grow, wow, what a unique opportunity to be able to save you all this time and effort. So for an example, you can also do this with additional logical volumes. So if you had a logical volume that you had 2 terabyte, you can create a larger NAS logical volume and be able to copy that data to another logical volume internally. So for this example, I created 2 volume groups. One is VG00, let's say ran out of space. So let's take a look what we're going to do. So let's say I had a simple logical volume, and I used all my capacity and I'm out of space. I can either create another NAS logical volume simply by just scrolling down, using the default NAS logical volume here, specify the size that I want, and then of course once I create this logical volume, I can copy all my data, my shares that's in this logical volume 000 and transfer and migrate all that to LV001. Or I can copy all my data from LV000 that is, let's say, filled and there's no more space available. And that could be, let's say, for the whole RAID array. And I can copy it to VG01 on my new volume, my RAID array that I've created. So here I created another NAS logical volume to give you a demonstration of how simple this is. So let's go continue now. So in this instance, what I want to show is how we were going to get the data from the NAS share of sources to destination. Let's take a look. So if I go to Configuration, NAS Resources, and here you'll see I have 2 shares. One is source and one is destination. Now, if we look here, right on the screen, I see that I have destination, which is empty, and source share, which I have created, which has my files and folders in here, my data. So what we want to be able to do is make sure that I want to either copy all my data from this LV00, which was on that volume group 00, to my destination share, which will be on my other volume group that I created, or my new array. Or again, it could be another logical volume that's in the same array, because you ran out of space. Or you're restructuring your volumes, or how you're going to be restructuring your data, how you're accessing your data. So to be able to copy this information, you can verify in a path too and see that there's no data in here, and vice versa. Even if you go to source, we can look at the path and see if what data we're looking at. So here you can see, if I click on the path, I can see all my directories and my files inside my directories. So let's go ahead and take a look of how we access the file commander. To be able to do this, you're going to need to use the console tools, which means that if you go to Setup, Administrator, Settings, and what you want to do is be able to use the remote console access feature. So you're going to scroll down all the way down to the remote console access feature. Make sure it's enabled. If you want to put an IP address here, you can. That just means you're allowing a certain PC on the network or system to be able to access the remote console. We default port is 22,222, though you can change that. And of course, 4-character password. The other information, if we use PuTTY, here if you click on the question mark, you'll see that you have information on how to access the PuTTY. And by the way, the username that we have is CLI for command line interface. Now what's going to be interesting is that though we do recommend to use VT100 plus for the function keyboards, for the keys on the keyboard with the PuTTY program, we recommend VT100 plus. In this case, I'm going to show you that you must use the escape key, which will show that where that setting's at. Again, if you need to ever go ahead and download PuTTY, it's a very easy program to get off the internet, very simple to use as well. So once you have this and you've enabled it, here we want to be able to show you PuTTY. Profuse apologies if the screen is not showing it so well because PuTTY doesn't expand. But here I set up a session here. We have DSS I just put in here. Make sure that the port is 22,222. SSH is enabled for the connection type. And of course my IP address to my DSS server. Now remember that note that we talked about is that the terminal keyboard session, if we go to terminal and keyboard, normally you would have it for VT100 plus. In this case, for using the file commander, you want to be able to use the escape function keypad. So once you do that, you save your session, hit save, and then of course you load it up. So let's go ahead and load up our console, and this is the DSS console. Again, when you log in, it's going to ask you for the username, which is going to be CLI, basically for command line interface, and of course the password which you have placed in there. Once we get into the console, let's go ahead and spread this out so everybody can see it a little better. There we go. Let's move this over a little bit. Now what we want to do is go enter Control-Alt-T for tools. So this is a tool function. We have other functionalities, but what we're going to focus on is called the add-ons, which is option number 6. Now remember, this is after you have installed the small update, rebooted the DSS V6 or V7. All right. Now here you can see File Commander right here. So we're going to go select File Commander. Now remember, we have files in source. So we're going to go select source. And here are all our directories and files. Now we're going to go over destination, and what we're using is the tab keys and the arrow keys in the space bar and an S key, and I'll go over that for you. So I'm going to select enter for my destination. I'm going to tab back over, and now I'm going to use the S key for select. So I'm going to use S, 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 and S. So I can select all of them by just holding down the S key. It'll take them all, or I can select certain files or certain directories. If I want to deselect, let's say that live cd.sng file, I just hit S again and that takes it off. So let's go ahead and put that back on. Now, if you notice, we have the functions up here, F2 info, F5 for copy, F6 for move, F7 to create a directory, and of course, remove files or directories. In this case, let's just do a simple copy. I'm going to hit F5, and of course, it says copy from shares source to shares destination, and it gives us file size of total amount that's going to be, and it's that quick. So instantly, we're moving files. So now let's say we wanted to come over and we want to use the S key, and we want to use F8 to remove them. And they're gone. So let's tab over. And now let's say we want to take all of them. And what we'll do is we'll use the F6 key to move all those files and directories from that one volume group that we have that was under the logical volume 00 over to the other volume group that I created. And there you go. So you're moving, let's say if you have terabytes of data, you can imagine how that will save you from being on the network. So let's go ahead and put these back. And we're just holding down the S key and go ahead and do migrate back over. So again, we're moving them from shares destination to the shares source. And that's how simple it is with the file commander. Engineers worked hard to put this on. We're still doing a lot of tests, but it's a very effective tool to be able to move the data within the system. So let's go ahead and exit out of here. To exit, you hit the Q key, and it brings you right on out. So it's that simple to use the file commander, and a very useful tool. Now let's go roll into the next section. The next section is that we wanted to talk about is how are we going to migrate our files without using the file commander. And let's say you wanted to do this with the data replication feature. The data replication is using rsync that's basically moving your shares or replicating your shares, however you want to do it, over to either LAN or WAN or even internally. So here we have our data in here, our NAS volume. It's full. Okay, we're out of space, or we need to replicate it maybe to another NAS volume on the same array, or maybe we need to replicate the data and move the data over to VG01 on our new array. When you do this, whatever the source of the NAS Logical volume is, you must have a snapshot assigned to it. So to create a snapshot, I've already done this already. Here you can see snap is 000, and I've created a snap size. Now, typically, what is the size for your snapshot? It depends upon the size of your total capacity. So for, let's say, a range of 1 terabyte, a snapshot of 50 gig is sufficient for what you're doing. So here, to create a snapshot, it's fairly simple. Again, we use the action pull down from the menu of the volume manager. And here you create new snapshot, specify the snapshot size, and of course hit apply or assign the snapshot to the NAS Logical volume, because you want to assign it to the source, not to the destination. And so once you've assigned that, you want to make sure down on the bottom it is assigned to LV000, which is my NAS Logical volume. So that's my source data. Now, next thing what we want to do is then go to our configuration. We want to go to NAS settings. And we want to make sure that the data replication agent is enabled on the share that we want for our destination. So we first need to enable the data replication service. We scroll all the way down from configuration NAS settings. Here we have the agent enabled. So make sure you hit the checkbox marks and then hit apply. Now we go to configuration, to the NAS resources, and to the shares. Now we have our files on source, and where we want to put them is on destination. So we want to be able to replicate our data and files on source, move them over to destination, and in that way later on maybe remove source because we're tearing down that old volume group and are going to be using the new volume group, or you're expanding or copying data, or you're migrating data over. So in the destination share, you will click on that, and what we want to do is make sure that we want to make sure that data agent is enabled for that share. Just because we enable the service doesn't mean that it's enabled for the share. You really don't want to have that automated for each share that you've created for security reasons. So if we scroll all the way down, we'll see that we have the data replication agent settings. Now here I've created a login name called test, and the password of 4 characters. You can, and you want to confirm it, and then of course you can set allow IP addresses that are allowed to receive the data that's coming in from the source. In this case, I just left it wide open. So once you've completed that, you hit apply. Now we go to maintenance, data file replication, and here we're going to create a task. So let's just create a task, very simple naming convention. Go test. Now we see that we have which share we will use. So the source is going to be the source share. Now, if you notice, it automatically grabbed that snapshot because we've already assigned it in the beginning when we were in the volume manager. Now here comes the interesting part. Which IP address should we use? Now, if you're using to a different IP address for a different DSS V6 or V7 server, yes, you can do that. Internally, we want to use a loopback address, which is 127.0.0.1. All right, so now we'll click on the refresh to find the destination share that has the data replication agent enabled for that share. Here we see that it did find 1 share. Now we're able to select down. We see the destination share. We're going to have the login as test. We'll provide the password. And at this point in time, I don't want to delete files, and I don't want to use the access control list, though you can if you're using any of the ADS and you have some of the access control lists, you want to inherit those and bring those over. If you're not using it, then it's faster to use this. I do want to replicate the log errors. So here I'm going to go ahead and create my replication task. I see my task is created on the left. So now I have the attributes and values to verify everything that has been set. So I have my loopback address. I see that my source is source for my share. My snapshot is correctly assigned. The destination share is pointing to the destination share that we've created. The login is test, and my other options that I've selected. Now as I scroll down, how do I want to be able to create my task? Okay, so I have 2 options I can select from. One is called an interval. And intervals are done in segments of 10, 15, 30, 1 hour, 2 hours, and so forth, all the way to 24-hour periods. For this, I don't want to wait 10 minutes. I want to be able to probably use weekly. And here I got many options. So for today is Tuesday, and right now it's 2:22 Eastern Time. So I'll probably want to use the hour clock, so it'll be 1400 hours. And I probably want to start it by the time we talk about this. Let's go ahead and do it at 2:24. Now I'm only going to do it for every week. I can do it for every even week and, of course, odd weeks. So let's go ahead and apply on that. Okay. Now, obviously, you want to make sure that your timing is properly set, because if you're expecting it to fire off at a certain time and your timing is not set, you want to be able to adjust that, and I can take you where that's at. So right now, we already have our task ready to go, and it's scheduled, and it should be kicking off in a few seconds. But let's say it didn't. What you want to do is you want to make sure your timing is correct, because you can come back and you can go to your tasks in status and tasks, and we could see that this was a test that I did yesterday. It was fine. But ours has not run yet. So there's no running task running right now. So that means we either did not hit the time value. So let's check that our time is correct. Now we still got a few seconds to go, but this is just to quickly show you and gives me time to be able to show you to set your time. So if you go to Setup and Hardware Settings, and you want to see that your time zone is right, since I'm located in Atlanta right now, I got New York as my time, is because we're all part of that Eastern time clock. And here I have, looks like 2:33, and it looks like we're on time. And so we should be good to go. So now let's take a look at going back to our task. It should be fired off at 2:24 or 1400 hours and 24 minutes. Let's go back to our status and go back to task. And it looks like we just finished. So come off again and just wait to get on that. Oh, that's the old one that started. Because what we're looking for is 11 on that date. So let's give it a second. Let's go back to our timing. Okay, so we are at 14:24. Our task should be running any second now. Let's go back to our task. And here we see it. So it did fire off because we have 2012, September, and the day today is the 11th. So what took place here is that the snapshot fired off first. Why? Because what the replication does is it's going to ask the snapshot to go ahead and take a snapshot of the volume because we're using copy on write. And so the snapshot's going to take the snapshot of the logical volume, and at that point, then the data replication will then go ahead and proceed to replicate the data from the snapshot. The reason for this is because it provides performance and also speed that is necessary, and also security as well. You really don't want to be using the replication if there's not a snapshot, because it would slow down the system as we are replicating file by file. And it's very quickly. As you can see, we just transferred that data internally very fast. If you could just have terabytes, it would really take no time at all, even for a snapshot. So if you had a 5 or 10 terabyte NAS Logical volume and you have a snapshot, it should take you no more than 30 seconds that snapshot to complete. And from that point, the replication takes those services and processes it thereof, and without having a performance hit too much on your DSS system. Well, I hope that explains everybody about how to use and transfer the data internally in the DSS without actually having any network congestion or going out back to your system and over to another DSS. You could do this all internally, and it saves a lot of time. Well, that's pretty much it. I want to just thank everybody for showing up. Again, remember that there are new releases coming out, and always there's some more information and support. Here again, if you want to watch the videos, we will have it loaded up. Then we'll go ahead and provide you the webcasts and videos. There's a question somebody's asking: how do we determine the size of the snapshot again? Okay, very good question. Again, by the way, if you want some more information on Snapshot, and I will answer your question, the how-to resources, and the reason why I'm doing this to you to let everybody know is that a lot of information is already in here. These videos that we have are very effective. We try to keep them short so you can get right in and get what you need done. But the question was, how do we determine the snapshot size? If you click here on how-to resources, you'll see Open-E snapshots, description of Open-E snapshot. This also tells you more information about what snapshot is, how do we use it, and also what size. So for example, the question was, how do we determine the size of a snapshot? Well, there's two different ways you could do it. One, you could say a percent value that you could use anywhere between, if like, for example, it could be 3 to 10%, depending on how widely you're going to be using. So one example is a good rule is 2 to 3 times the size of the total volume or the amount of data that you have. So for example, if a volume size is 100 gig, oops, I don't know why it's there. Yeah, I'm fighting it. 100. Actually, it's a 1,000 gig volume. Then we are reserving space for the daily snapshot. We would expect a 10 gigabit changes every day. So if you're expecting 10 gigabit of changes every day, then just put a snapshot size of 20 to 30 gig. So it's the two schools of thinking that if you're going to be transferring a lot of data and it's going to be larger than or 50% of the volume, then you might want to go ahead about 12 to 15% of the total size. If you have, let's say, what we have an example here, that you have let's say 1,000 gigabyte volume or 1 terabyte volume. and you only expect to do about 10 gigabyte of changes a day. So your database is only going to be making new changes about 10 gigs a day. Then you want to be able to create space for a snapshot size to be either 2 to 3 times, which would be 20 to 30 gig. So that kind of gives you the value of how much your snapshot should be. And there's more information here into the snapshot about how we use it on copy, on write, and also for the block volumes and the file level descriptions as well. So I usually take this on everybody on to these information about the how-to resources and where to get the information of the videos and white papers, data sheets, and also there's knowledge-based articles and case studies. Another unique tool is, and then we get a lot of these questions, how large or capacity should I be with my license of DSS V6 or V7? If you look here, we just pushed this RAID controller calculator here that you'll see. You can select either DSS V6 or V7, hardware RAID controller or software RAID controller, and of course specify the amount that you want. And of course this gives, so let's say I had a question today that was very interesting. He had, I think it was like 3 terabyte drives, and they were calculating what is the license keys that they will need for DSS V6. So in that he had 3 terabyte drives, and he said, well, we're going to start off with 10, but we're going to grow into probably another 5 more drives. And so I said, okay, well, what we're going to start off with on a RAID 5 is you're going to be at 24 terabytes, 24.5 terabytes. So here, you know, they said, okay, but if we add down the road another 5, what should we do? So we went and calculated it, and it came out to 38 terabytes, and at which point that told them what type of license keys they needed to purchase. So we got a lot of unique things in here. Thank you, everybody. If there's any more questions, I'll leave them up for a bit, and then I'll go ahead and cancel out the recording. Thank you very much for showing up.